Morning. Welcome to King's Report News Hour for Monday, the 50th year of Tiangi, the 11th month and the 9th day by the heaven calendar. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chengdu Kyungji Moon. We have about 42 days and about 5 or 6 hours, 5 hours or so, I guess, until the inauguration. 42 days plus. And yes, things are going forward. And wow, what a weekend! What a weekend! What a weekend! But let's do our new normal routine. And first, looking at the 5 places where the king has established the Cheongguk flag right now in Hong Kong, Tennessee, 48 degrees with rain falling right now. And periods of rain this morning, otherwise cloudy, high of 56 today. Tonight, getting down to 48 degrees, low clouds and mild with a shower. And then at the Cheongguk Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, right now 29 degrees, partly cloudy. Getting up to 42 today, periods of rain from late morning on. Tonight, low clouds and fog, a couple of showers this evening, and then low of 36. Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 49, getting up to 75 today. Wow, mild with plenty of sun. Going to be a nice day. And then tonight, clear and a low of 47. And then at the Suncheon Palace on the Korean Peninsula there at the southwest part of the country, 40 degrees right now, some clouds, getting down to 31 tonight, and then 54 for high tomorrow, some sun, then increasing clouds. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 41 degrees right now under clear skies, getting down to 33 tonight, abundant sunshine tomorrow, high of 55. All right, let's go to Father's Word, and here we are today. We're in the book on true love. That's a nice place to be. So let's look at this as chapter 1. Which section would this be? Anyway, that's chapter 1. Ingan, of course, is the Korean word for people or human being. Like in the plural, of course, it could be, well, illu is a humanity, would be illu, but the ingan is people, human being. So when people become as one body with God, 그의 심정과 감정은 무한한 체휼성과 행복감에 취하게 됩니다. Then that person's one, or let's put it in the singular. When a person becomes as one body with God, his 심정 being what? The irrepressible impulse of the heart to invest, to love in an object partner so as to experience love and joy. His 심정 and his 감정, his emotions, become intoxicated with the happiness of experiencing God through experience. 체휼 is a word that Father would use from time to time to express things that cannot be expressed in words, but can only be expressed or learned through experience. And God's love is one of those. There are no words to express God's love. For one thing, any words that we have, any language that we have, comes from a background of fallen human history, right? So there's, of course, no way to express that. So the only way to come to know God's word, God's love, is to experience it directly. And that happens when we become as one body with God. 결국 사랑에 의해서 하나님과 인간은 하나가 되는 것입니다. So ultimately, and this is important. This sentence expresses a very fundamental difference between Father's teachings and traditional Christianity. Listen to this. Ultimately, 사랑에 의해서, by love, 하나님과 인간은, God and human beings, become one. 하나가 되는 것입니다. Become one. In traditional Christianity, God is way up there and human beings are way down there, and never the twain shall meet, right? But in Father's understanding, that It was when God's original ideal of creation is fulfilled. We're not talking about fallen human beings, sinful human beings. We're talking about people who have been liberated from original sin, people who have washed away all of their sins, who have resolved all of their fallen nature, and have achieved direct dominion with the completion of the character. Then a person, man, woman, becomes one with God in love, one with God in love. And this is the power of love in Father's teaching. This is the power of love. Love is what brings God and human beings together. Without love, this could not happen. 사랑에 의해 인간과 세계가 하나 되며, so by love, human beings and the world become one. 하나님의 창조 목적, 이상 세계의 실현도 여기서부터 시작되는 것입니다. And the accomplishment or realization of the world, of God's original ideal of God's. Let's do this a little more accurately. The ideal of God's purpose of creation, the world of the ideal of God's purpose of creation will also begin here. October 13th, 1970. Praise God. Wow, yes. That is love. You know, that is love. That's love. So, where do we learn love? How do we learn how to love? Pop quiz. In the family. The family is the school of love, Father says. It is the dojang or dojo, depending on whether you want to say it in Korean or Japanese, of love. This is where we are trained in love, where we are trained in love. And, when things happen in the family, when you have some friction in the family, all right, part of the training. The husband helps the wife to complete her character. The wife helps the husband to complete his character. And also the children, especially the 2-year-olds, but others as well, teenagers, also help the parents to complete their characters. Yes, praise God, praise God. That's what's going on. Now you know, yes. My theory, you cannot go to heaven without unless you have successfully raised at least 2 teenagers. My theory, okay. My theory. That's not Father. I apologize. All right. Now, the weekend that was. Wow. What a difference a weekend makes. So, first of all, the Korean president has survived his impeachment vote because the National Assembly could not achieve a quorum in order to validate a vote. And it was interesting because they needed for an impeachment vote. For other votes, they just needed a majority for a quorum, but for an impeachment vote, they needed 2/3. They needed 200 National Assembly members out of a total 300 to be in their seats in the chamber in order to validate the vote. And the government party, even though the government party leader said that he would vote, or said that he would, what did he say? Actually, he said that he would vote in favor of impeachment, I think. Yeah. But anyway, but the party itself said that no, we're going to oppose impeachment. But if the quorum were met, then it would only take 192. So I think it only take like 8 votes. It would only take 8 votes from among the government party to pass the impeachment resolution. And it was a secret vote. So the party obviously could not trust their members. So what they did was told all their members to leave the chamber. Right? If they leave the chamber, then the chamber will no longer have a quorum, and no impeachment vote could be validated. And actually, 3 party members remained, but anyway, that was not enough for there to be a quorum. And so anyway, that kind of a parliamentary shenanigans went on, but the end result is that the president, Yoon, is still the president. His defense minister resigned, and then he was arrested. And the opposition party right now, because they are in control of the National Assembly, they are conducting an investigation and to see whether the crime of insurrection applies. And also the police are also investigating the president and others for possible crime of insurrection, not only the president, but also others who might have been involved. And so, and the president, of course, came out and apologized and said that he would not play a role in the political situation. So everything's sort of in an upheaval in Korea. It's interesting because he's still the commander in chief of the military, but anyway. So, and also he said that he would not try to impose martial law again. I think he kind of learned his lesson that maybe that's not the way to do it. I think, as I've said before, he acted rashly. It's true that the opposition party, with their significant majority, they have 192 seats. 151 is a majority. They have 192. So with that large majority, they have been acting in a dictatorial manner. Really, I'm sure Nancy Pelosi would be very envious of the way that the communists in South Korea have been operating, and they basically made it impossible for him to govern because they impeach him, they impeach him, they impeach him, they impeach him, they impeach prosecutors, they impeach everybody. Basically making it impossible for the executive or the judiciary to operate in Korea. And so I can understand how the president would be very frustrated, but the proper path for him to take, in my opinion, would be to use the bully pulpit of the presidency. The presidency comes with what we call a bully pulpit, right? As the president speaks, people listen. And so he needed to do that to educate the people, but instead he sort of pulled the trigger on the martial law, and the military really wasn't prepared, either tactically or psychologically either. I suspect the military, I think, was very reluctant to follow through on his orders. Well, right now we have that situation there where things are in chaos there. Then, yeah, excuse me. Then in Syria, yeah, on Friday it looked like it was going to take the rebels maybe a couple of weeks to get to Damascus and overthrow Assad. Not a couple of weeks, barely a couple of days, right? It looks like the government, the military, just sort of decided not to fight. It's amazing. It's amazing. And of course, his allies, Russia and Iran, couldn't help him. For Russia, it's obvious that they are involved in Ukraine, and so they did make a few strikes with their air force, but not enough to make a difference. And so the rebels just sort of marched on down that highway. They went from north to south. I showed you the map on Friday. I mean, okay. And they captured Damascus, and Assad managed to get away, and his family managed to get away, it looks like, and he looks like he wound up in Moscow, and Putin has given him asylum. This is what we are told, and no one seems to be doubting that that is in fact true, although there is not actual confirmation. Iran might also have wanted to help, but I think things just happened too quickly for them to get their forces in place for them to do any good. And so they looks like they held back as well. And so the upshot is that Assad has, has been basically dumped on the dustbin of history, and he is no longer in charge of Syria. So who is? Well, the prime minister says that the government is still functioning. Let's see. Uh, prime minister says it is still functioning, and um, let's see what the fallout of all this is. One congressman, a Republican from South Carolina, has said that this would be an equivalent to the fall of the Berlin Wall. This is Representative Joe Wilson, Republican of South Carolina. He's talking on Fox Reports Sunday. It is truly equivalent to the Berlin Wall, which led to a ripple effect of dozens of countries becoming free after 50 years of occupation and totalitarian control. Bashir al-Assad fled Syria after rebels stormed the capital. We know that. Wilson argued that Israel's success in weakening Iran and its proxies, as well as Ukraine, weakening Russia, led to the developments in Syria. He predicted this will have a dramatic impact on the ability of war criminal Putin to enforce his capabilities. And then Netanyahu touted the fall of Assad's regime on Sunday, saying it was a direct result of Israel's attack on Iran and Hezbollah, while noting the situation overall is fraught with significant dangers. All right. And Netanyahu also said, and finally, we will remain vigilant. Make no mistake, some of the rebel groups that took down Assad have their own grim record of terrorism and human rights abuses. We've taken note of statements by the leaders of these rebel groups in recent days, and they're saying the right things now, but as they take on greater responsibility, we will assess not just their words, but their actions. I'm sorry, that's not Netanyahu, that's Biden saying that on Sunday. And then the president detailed that following Assad's departure, the U.S. will support Syria's neighboring countries, such as Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and Israel, should any threat arise from Syria during this period of transition. Biden said this effort will include senior administration officials meeting with world leaders, and the president also speaking directly with leaders of the neighboring nations. As questions swirl over how the Middle Eastern country will be governed following the rebel takeover, Representative Wilson believed the Syrian people will be pushing as a diaspora for a free and democratic Syria. Really? uh, oh boy. You know, my theory that I've had for a long time is that the political system of any country eventually has to grow out organically from that country's or from that people's tradition. But what we've seen is that every place America grows, they try to take this democracy, especially American democracy, and sort of plump it down. Afghanistan, Iraq, and also, you know, Japan as well. And America basically, you know, plumped down the American democracy onto Japan after World War II. And the Japanese, for thousands of years have been very adept at taking something that comes from overseas, from another country or from another culture and another tradition, and sort of molding it over time so that it becomes consistent with Japanese tradition. And they've done this with religions. Buddhism, for example, and that's an example, and Confucianism is an example of that, where you have Japanese Buddhism and Japanese Confucianism. One sociologist writing, I think, in the 1960s said that in Japan, there's actually only one religion. There's only one religion in Japan, and that's the Japan religion. Okay. And within the Japan religions, you have a number of denominations. You have the Christian denomination of the Japan religion. So Christianity also becomes very Japanese when it goes into Japan. And you have the Buddhist denomination of the Japan religion, the Confucian, and so forth and so on. But it seems that, of course, it was the FDR, liberals, the globalists and liberals who did this in Japan after World War II. But it's consistent, though. It's consistent. It was consistent, it seems like, throughout the 20th century. Also in Latin America, right? Americans always expected Latin American countries to adopt the American democratic system, and never really worked. And Afghanistan is an example of that failure. Iraq is an example of that failure. And now Syria. What is it here? The Syrian people will be pushing for, as a diaspora, for a free and democratic Syria. So here we go again. Here we go again. It sounds like we are in danger then of getting involved in nation building again, which is not a good idea. It has not been a good idea. Just because it succeeded after World War II in Germany and in Japan doesn't mean that you can do it anywhere you want. Right? Germany and Japan were special cases, especially Japan had a democratic, briefly had a democracy prior to World War II in the early 1900s, 1910s, especially 1900s and 1910s, before the military took over. But then sort of after World War II, sort of Japan sort of reached back to that tradition, and Germany also. But these societies don't really have that kind of democratic tradition. They have tribal tradition, and within the tribes, there's a certain process for governing, right, through consensus or else choosing someone who's a leader or something like that. And they have to go through that process. You cannot just take democracy and say, okay, well, this is what you guys want, right? We know that this is what you want, and we've decided that it doesn't work that way. It has to come organically out of the traditions of those ethnic groups and so forth. And Syria has actually, where right now they say that there are basically four sort of major chunks of ethnic groups and or political forces in Syria, and we'll see how things work out. But right now, the only thing that is certain is that there will be a period of chaos. Chaos is good. I like chaos. Of course, it's not so good or not so comfortable for people who are going through the chaos personally, because you could be in danger and and all that. But chaos is better than a situation where someone comes in and just imposes something. Well, let's see what grows out of the Syrian situation. Now, Joe Wilson saying that Representative Joe Wilson saying that this is as significant as the fall of the Berlin Wall. Well, I'm sure he knows a lot more about the Middle East than I do. I don't know, but we know already that there are certain things to come out. But we need to see what is going to happen next. Of course, chaos within Syria, but what is Iran going to do about this? Iran, for Iran, this is a very big blow to their ability to project power and influence in the Middle East. Of course, Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy, was one of the major forces in Syria, and Iran was using Syria to transport both personnel and weapons and funds to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Money that they got from Obama and Biden from their oil sales. And now that may be much more difficult. And so this is a major blow to Iran. And what are they going to do about that? Are they going to sit back and say, okay, well, that's life. I guess we'll have to just focus on something else? Or are they going to do something to try and create a pro-Iranian regime in Damascus? And the situation in Damascus right now is basically, as one person said, bad guy versus bad guy. There are no good guys right now in Syria. So, especially this idea of freedom and democracy, who's going to do that? There's no George Washington there. There's no Thomas Jefferson there. There's no one who believes in the natural rights or inalienable rights of human beings. There's no such philosophical foundation for that in any of the groups, as far as I can see. And especially the leader of the group that spearheaded this rebellion. It has a long Arab name, and it's abbreviated in English as HTS, so I'll just use that to name. Leader of that, whose name is Mohammed Jalani, he has a $10 million bounty on his head because the HTS as a group has been designated as a terrorist organization by the United Nations, by the United States, by Britain, by Canada, and a lot of other countries. And the U.S. has put a $10 million bounty on his head. Anyone who can arrest him or put him in handcuffs and deliver him to the U.S. Embassy, I think is going to collect $10 million, if that's possible. Not likely. So he's basically kind of the most prominent person now, but he's also not the only player right now. So we'll have to see. But he's not likely to be friends with Iran, at least not now, because he was fighting against the Iranian-backed Hezbollah and the government forces until now. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Chaos is the only certainty right now. And in Russia, what is Russia going to do? As I mentioned on Friday, Russia has a very important naval base in Syria, Tartus, on the Mediterranean coast. And also it has there's an airfield that I think is not officially a Russian base, but Russia has been operating that airfield or that airport a little bit north of Tartus. And this airport is important not just for Russia's presence in Syria, but also for Russia projecting influence into Africa, it turns out. For Russia helping rebels in Libya and in Sudan, and other places in Africa where Russian mercenaries such as the Wagner Group have been fighting. And so Russia wants to retain control of those places. Now, according to people who are watching the situation through the satellite images, Russia has withdrawn all of its ships and much of its equipment from the naval base. And also, even while the rebels were marching south, there were trucks transporting what looked like missiles from the air base down to the naval base so that they could be put on ships and then taken out to sea. away from the fighting there. But sure, Russia wants to go back into those places. They want to come to an agreement with whoever takes charge in Syria so that they can retain control of that naval base and that air base, because that is strategically crucial importance to Russia. It is the only kind of a warm, it's the largest Russian base outside of Russia. It's the largest military base outside of Russia, and it's a warm water port, and having a base there saves the Russian Navy from having to go through the Turkish Straits of Dardanelles and the Bosphorus Straits to get into the Black Sea. And right now they can't even go through those straits right now because Turkey's not letting Russia use those straits right now. So without that base, Russia is in a, strategically speaking, is in a very difficult situation in terms of projecting its power to other places around the world. So they definitely want those bases, but before they can retain control of those bases, they have to figure out who's going to come out on top in Damascus. So I guess that will take time, and so Russia is trying to find out what's going on there. It's also a huge blow to their prestige and so forth, and it just shows how much weaker Russia has become as a result of the war in Ukraine, which has been going on now almost 3 years. Has it been 3 years almost? Yes, almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in a couple of months or so. So Iran and Russia not having a good day right now. And they will have to play some kind of a card to come out of that, to turn things around, to try and turn things around there. And we'll see how that works out. So let's see here. Okay. And Russia, by the way, also is in a difficult position because U.S. sanctions are bringing about are pushing the ruble lower, although not as low as it had been in the past. And actually, in the last couple of days, into last week, last couple of days, it actually rebounded. The ruble actually rebounded quite nicely. Let me see what's going on right now. It was above 100 rubles to the dollar, but I think now, when I looked at it yesterday, it was less than that. Let me see what's going on now. The ruble, okay, well, it's back up near 100, 99.88. So it's volatile, isn't it? It's going back and forth. Let's see. Yeah, let's look at 1 month. Okay. Let me just maybe I can show you this, the volatility of the ruble. This is a 1 month chart that you're about to see. And you can see that at the end of November, near the end of November, November 27 and 28, I guess 27 basically, was its highest, where it got up to about 113. And then it came back down below 100, and then now is creeping back up towards that 100 mark. So anyway, but overall though, if you look at a little bit longer, let's look at it 1 year. Well, this is the direct effect of U.S. sanctions. Let me cough again. Okay. A direct effect of the imposition of further U.S. sanctions going on. So that's having an effect on the ruble, and it's becoming more and more difficult for Russia to do business. They had been sort of continuing to sell energy to Europe and so forth. Let's take a look at this story here. This is a German site. Russia in panic as U.S. sanctions trigger ruble collapse. Well, the words like panic, people use them to try and get clicks. But anyway, it's like I say, journalists, what is their mission? Connect consumers with advertisers. So words like panic help them do that. Russia's currency has fallen sharply as U.S. sanctions bite. And this was November 28th, and it was November 27th when we had that peak that I showed you just a while ago. Further pressure on the country's already strained financial system. The Russian ruble has plunged to its lowest level against the dollar since the immediate aftermath of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in March 2022. The ruble hit 113 against the dollar on Thursday. Russia's central bank announced it would stop foreign currency purchases, try and strengthen the currency and ease pressures on the financial markets. And it looks like they were at least temporarily successful. The ruble has been sliding since late summer, falling by more than a third since August. Oil prices have fallen in the same period, hitting Russia's earning capacity for its most important commodity. That has piled pressure onto a war economy already struggling under the weight of soaring inflation. President Vladimir Putin has dramatically ramped up military spending over the past 18 months in an attempt to gain the upper hand in the war on Ukraine. But of course, the Russian economy right now has been sort of reorganized as a wartime economy, and so part of this is due to that fact. But then let's see here. Here we see that this is the Express reporting that Chinese banks are now reluctant to do business with Putin, with Russia. Chinese banks turn on Vladimir Putin and refuse to work with Russian finance. Russia is already suffering from inflation through high interest rates and could now lose yet more business. And this was December 4th. Okay. And Chinese banks are refusing to work with financial institutions in Russia that have been sanctioned by the West. The move from Beijing's banks could deal yet another crushing blow to Vladimir Putin. Again, crushing, just like panic. It's a clickbait thing. And the Russian economy is already in the midst of multiple crises. After Russia invaded Ukraine, the West hit Moscow with wide-ranging sanctions in an attempt to isolate Putin on the world stage. And as a result, Russia has relied heavily on its relationship with China, but also India, but China. But now with China facing the threat of secondary sanctions, Beijing banks are now look set to steer clear of Russian counterparts. So in other words, the Chinese banks don't want to do business with Russia because if they do, then the Treasury Department may sanction the Chinese banks. Okay? For example, Gazprom Bank, the main exporter of Russian gas, was among them. That the U.S. Treasury Department imposed more sanctions. This played a major role in the collapse of the ruble last week. The Russian currency was trading at 114 against the dollar, its lowest since the start of the Ukraine war, and so forth. Bank of China is refusing to accept payments from Russian banks that have been sanctioned. But then Putin made an interesting remark towards the end of last week, where he said that no one can stop a payment that goes through that uses Bitcoin. He said that. He said no one can stop Bitcoin. At least that was the English translation that we got. And a lot of people seem to interpret that to mean that no one can stop Bitcoin from playing out its game theory over the next months and years. But I think what he meant was that no one can stop a Bitcoin payment. I think I would like to maybe get some clarification from someone who actually understands the original Russian on that. But I think that's what he meant. So is Russia going to start using Bitcoin for its international payments, or maybe stable coins? That's possible, but the problem with stable coins or with other sort of cryptocurrencies is that they also can be sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department. Stablecoin, for example, the largest stablecoin, Tether, is based in Hong Kong, and um, what they do is they take money from clients or consumers. They use that money to purchase assets such as U.S. Treasuries, and then they issue these coins that are backed by the dollar, the U.S. Treasuries, or whatever dollar-based assets, dollar-denominated assets that they buy, mostly U.S. Treasuries. So they are in a position where they can easily be sanctioned by the U.S. government, and they're aware of that. Bitcoin, however, is not so easy because someone says, "Okay, well, let's sanction Bitcoin." How are you going to do that? You cannot call up the CEO of Bitcoin because there is no CEO. You cannot close their bank account because there is no bank account for Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no bank account, has no CEO, it has no headquarters, it has no committee that operates it or anything like that. It's just a protocol, some computer software that is operating from tens of thousands of computers around the world. And because it's so decentralized, there's no way to block it, to block payments on Bitcoin 100%. They can track the payments. Yes, they can track the payments because Bitcoin is not anonymous; it's pseudonymous, meaning that you can see the money moving from one address to another address. But whose address is this? Well, there are companies that figure that out. They say, okay, well, we see that there are a number of payments being made from this address, and based on where the money came from and where it's going, we are pretty sure that this address belongs to this person. It's not 100%, but they can make a pretty good guess. And so the U.S. government could potentially do something about that, but there's no way to block the payment, actually. You cannot stop money from moving. You can see it going from one address to another address, but you cannot stop the movement from one address to another address in the same way that they can stop a bank payment, for example, from going from one place to another, right? These days, banks are so paranoid about money laundering. Did you see the story about a child had a lemonade stand, I think, and made something like $2,000 or something, and took a check for $2,000 to deposit it in the bank, and the bank froze the account. The bank froze the account, and it took about a year, finally, for that child to get that $1,000 so they could actually spend it. Come on, it was like $1,000 or $2,000. I forget the exact. It was either $1,000 or $2,000. I think it was $2,000. The banks are so paranoid now because they're afraid of the U.S. government, of the specifically OFAC, Office of Foreign Asset Control. Right? And Foreign Asset Control, of course, is using their computers, using their AI to try and spot money laundering. But a lot of innocent people are getting caught up. Myself, I had kind of a brush with that recently, where I designated a certain account to receive a direct payment, a direct deposit, like we often do. And guess what happened? The account got frozen. Yes, the account got frozen. And I protested, and the freeze was lifted in I think it was about, what was it? I guess a couple of days. And there was no harm done. But that's how paranoid these people are in the banks. And, bankers are a paranoid bunch to begin with. I think that's a requirement for the job. I think that you have to suffer from paranoia. But point is that Putin appears to be seeing Bitcoin as a solution to that. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with that, because the Bitcoin is still it's a overall market cap is only about $2 trillion right now. So it's still quite small compared to other asset classes such as gold um, or other asset classes like that. Gold is apparently about, what is it, about 17 trillion or something like that. So Bitcoin is not yet ready to be taking on the task of serving as a currency for a large part of a major part of international trade. But we'll see what Putin is going to try to do, because they have to find some way now of breaking out of this situation. We'll see what they try to do. Now, let's see here. Meanwhile, of course, President Putin was in Paris over the weekend to attend the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. Kind of ironic, I felt, as I was reading about this, about people saying, "Oh, Notre Dame Cathedral, the symbol of Christianity," and things like that. But it's in Paris, which is the capital city of a country that, ever since the French Revolution, has done everything possible to exclude Christianity and religion from the public square. And I look on the Notre Dame Cathedral in a similar way that I would look on, for example, Angkor Wat in Cambodia. It's a relic of something that was once great, but now all it is relics. Of course, I know Mass is still being held at the Notre Dame Cathedral, and they had their first Mass in, was it 5 years or something like that yesterday? But it's a relic of the past. And Angkor Wat as well. A lot of restoration is going on there to sort of preserve that site. And in a similar way, I guess Notre Dame is being preserved in that way as well. But you cannot say that it represents today's Christianity, or even the Catholic Christianity. I think if anything, it's a sad monument to what has happened to spirituality in France and in continental Europe specifically. But I do want, but this ceremony, which I think, if you haven't seen it already, you've got to see it. A photograph of President Biden with First Lady Jill Biden. You see this? President Trump was invited there. Joe Biden did not go. The White House said that he had a scheduling conflict. And so the First Lady was the official representative of the United States. And President Trump was also invited. And basically, Trump went there, sort of his debut, shall we say, or maybe his victory lap on the world stage. He went there and he really took charge. He met Macron, of course. He met Zelensky. He met Prince William. Went to the British Embassy to meet Prince William there, one-on-one. And then, this photograph here, they're sitting there, I guess, in the cathedral. And I look at this photograph and I say to myself, I think this is a good photograph to sort of give some advice to young men. And this is my advice: that if a girl looks at you with that kind of an expression, you got one of two choices, one of two options. If you're available and you think she's cute, then ask her out. If you're not available or you don't think she's cute, you better turn and run like the wind because she is into you. She is onto you. Joe Biden, I tell you, I think she voted for him. I think she voted for him. And I think this photograph only confirms my suspicion, aside from the fact that she wore red to the polls on November 5th. I think, yeah, I think she voted for him. All right, I gotta go. And anyway, I have this other story that I was going to do, but we'll do that tomorrow, I guess. All right. So also Israel is moving into the Golan Heights. It's moving into Syrian territory. Its ground troops are. Its air force is striking weapons dumps or weapons stockpiles in Syria. The question, of course, is what's happening to the chemical weapons stockpile of Syria. I haven't seen anything there. And also the Austin Tice, the American journalist who's been held in Syria, we think, for 12 years. I haven't seen any news about him. And I hope that tomorrow we'll have news about him as well. I got to go now. So I will see you all tomorrow. God bless, Godspeed. May his kingdom come quickly.